Now, I was thinking the other day about books I've read out throughout my life, and this does include school. At school, we read books such as Huckleberry Finn and His Friends, the unedited version. Yeah, no reductions in it. So the actual language, which was very representative of the time. We learned a lot about what are current trends now, what people are trying to eradicate from society now. And also, we read other books, such as Animal Farm, which I now find very, very interesting in some current views that are happening now. I was given this book to teach in Brazil, funny enough. It is a very, very interesting thing when we start looking at literature. What we read, obviously at school, we had a prescribed list. I mean, other books we read at school were Of Mice and Men, which is an American classic. That was John Steinbeck. I was never a great fan of John Steinbeck's works. I don't know why. I've tried a couple of times with his. I tended to enjoy reading what I wanted to read. Now, today I'm not going to talk about anything very highfalutin or anything. I mean, one series of stories I did enjoy, and this is the actual book I used to read at night, was Sherlock Holmes. My parents bought me this. I read it a lot. You can see it's been well loved. It's travelled around the world with me. Quite a big book to travel around with. But I used to read that at night when I went to bed. If we didn't have video games or mobile phones, so I went to bed and read. Yeah, Sherlock Holmes. I used to clear about 3 stories a night sometimes. My parents used to come up to when they were going to bed and see me still reading. Yeah, I got told off for reading too late at night. So yeah, I used to read all kinds of material. And as I've said on many occasions before, many occasions, I like the film Star Wars. So much so, I actually read a novelization of the actual film. It's a little bit different from the film. In the novel, had Han Solo actually meeting Jabba the Hutt. And I've probably lost Steve at this point, but yeah, there'll be other people out there will know. So it was actually in the novelisation of the film, but not in the film until later editions of the film. So again, yeah, sometimes these things have a deviation. Again, there are sort of things. Now, I've met people who say people should read this book and that book. These stories are not very good. For example, I was also brought up reading Enid Blyton books, which included the Famous Five books, which were good adventure stories for kids, quite harmless. Right was right, wrong is wrong. They went on their adventures. They probably could seem dated now, but it was fun. And I was reading these in the 1970s. And again, the books were written in the 1950s. Yeah, she wrote another one I read called Smuggler Ben as well, about a young person who dressed up as a smuggler, did their own thing, had their own adventure. Again, this was all good. Now, modern educationalists don't like Enid Blyton for a lot of reasons. Some of them I just do not agree with or didn't see at the time and never have done. So, I mean, it is a case of encouraging young people to read. In more recent times, and I've not read the books, younger people have been reading, and older people, Harry Potter novels, which again, adventure, encourages younger people to read. Now, there's been objections to them, but they were harmless, they were fun. Youngsters were getting very excited, get through a novel during the weekend. So yeah, so the point is, enjoying reading. Yeah, my school, the first year of my secondary school, we were about 11. We had one teacher, Mr. Fanning, at Thomas More High School in Westcliff, and he used to put all us boys, the whole year, a seat apart in the assembly hall, and you just read a book. I think it's for 1 or 2 hours. That was it. You couldn't move. You sat there and read, totally focused. And I think that actually helped me in later life learn how to actually just focus, concentrate on what I was doing, no distractions. And he was quite one of the best teachers ever. Very strict. He could be your best friend or your worst enemy. You made that decision yourself. Yeah. And he was certainly believed in reading. There was no restrictions what we could read. You brought your own book in. You put your book on the floor. You put your bag on the floor under the seat. So if you were going to reach into it, he could see you, your head bobbing up and down. I think it used to be, but you had your book on your lap and you read that for an hour. Every 2 weeks, we're expected to at least put one book review in or record one book. You're expected to read a book once every 2 weeks. And the teachers may ask you questions about it as well. They didn't often know what the books were. We had a school library, which had all sorts of content. Now, there's been some things in the media recently about books in the library and things like this. I went to a Catholic school. I read a book about Satanism. I don't know if the teachers knew it was there. I just got a horror book out one day and just read it. Yeah, but it's sort of, we were encouraged to broaden our minds, as it were, by reading. Comes from a time where grammar wasn't widely taught in schools, certainly not in English, not in the English-speaking world. This was effectively the 80s at this point. You know, it was a modern way of teaching. You learned by reading. And later on in life, you begin to learn how important grammar is, even in English. But yeah, it is I enjoyed it. Obviously, in later life, I've read quite a few interesting things. I'm going to recommend a book for anyone that likes Sherlock Holmes. It's this series of stories here, The Railway Detective by Edward Marston. It's a whole series of books he's written based around railways. Obviously, I have an interest in railways, but even if you don't, you're almost cast back into the Victorian era. Lots of research, very much in the vein of Arthur Conan Doyle, but not an exact copy. Probably is a little bit more violent in this, describes the murders in far more detail. But yeah, very, very good fun to read. And yes, and I'll just finish off by reading to show that I'm quite happy to be diverse and read different things. Here's a book I read, well, a few years ago now. I might reread again, not because of any political affiliations. It's just a very, very interesting book to read about somebody that was probably iconic from the last century. You know, why he became the person he did become, agree or disagree with him. It's very interesting, a ride across Bolivia and Peru. Because I visited some of the places that he had visited on the motorcycle, well, it's only half the journey, it was a motorcycle before it broke down. It again was very, very interesting for me on several different levels. Obviously, a translation from the original Spanish into English. And again, I sometimes have tried reading books written in Portuguese from Brazil in English, and they're just going back now to read them all, or read as much as I can about them again in the original Portuguese, because sometimes literature does lose a lot through translation. So yeah, I mean, one series of books I did read as well was a Song of Ice and Fire, which is the, if you like, the original novel for the TV series Game of Thrones. I went back and read the novels of that, individual novels. I've seen them here in Brazil, written in Portuguese, read a couple of pages, totally different flavour to them. So I find that quite interesting, that sometimes, yeah, translation, you do lose an awful lot between culture. There's another book I have read is City of God, which was a film, a Brazilian film. I read the novel that was being translated into English. And it's actually quite funny because whoever translated it evidently had never visited Brazil, from what I can tell. And some of the nicknames is King of Us All. Yeah, where one of the policemen was known as King of Us All, had a different name in the original novel. It was a literal translation, which I actually found quite funny. Anyway, here's a brief overview of some of the literature I like. I've got others here that we might talk about. So it's over to you, Steve. What do you think about my selection? Or have you got anything else you'd like to add to that? Okay.
Well, and now I know what your library looks like,
Yeah.
There are, I think you can get books about anything, anything, even the most remote interest, somebody has written a book about it. Myself, my upbringing was a little bit different than yours. If we go back to the infant school, I was reading the Janet and John books.
Oh yeah, I remember them. Yeah.
The Ladybird books, that's how we
Yeah.
learned to read.
Yeah.
When I was about 7 years old, 9 years old, I read Treasure Island school. I separated myself. I was separated from the rest of the kids because I was quite a prolific reader.
Yeah.
My dad sent me to school with this Treasure Island to read, and I was separated and went to the library to read this Treasure Island book.
Yeah.
And in the sort of later years, I was always in encyclopedias. I suppose if that salesman arrived knocking on the door with the Encyclopedia Britannica to sell, I might have taken him up on the offer if I didn't have it for free at school.
Yeah.
When I was adolescent, one of the books I really enjoyed was a book called Brother to the Ox by a guy called Fred Kitchen. And he was on about the 30s, the 20s and 30s. He was a farm laborer and spoke about what he had for breakfast and how his day was. And he went to the huge town of a place called Maltby where we lived at that time when I'd read. I think that's probably what spurred me to read the book, because it was about him on Sandbeck Estate, which is an estate nearby to Maltby, the town. And so that I had a sort of a social interest in that aspect of it. At that time, I was interested in folk music at the same time, so that had an awful lot to do with it. Learning how the rural life was lived, in the era of yore, they say.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So going on, carrying on through life, I read. I like humor, and so I read an awful lot of. I think it was called Michael Cohen, and he wrote The Art of Course Acting, The Art of Course Sailing, and he did a series of books about how to do things really badly, and it was a really funny. The books were really funny, and of course I was involved with Punch magazine at the time.
Right.
And embarrassing myself on a train once when. In the compartments on the older trains, they're face to face, the seats, and I just started laughing, reading this Punch article, and I just couldn't stop, and the person sat opposite, they had to laugh as well, because when you see somebody having a good laugh, it's contagious.
Oh yeah, that's good. Healthy.
They were wondering what on earth has he been reading to make him laugh so much. Then you go on to I've read the Book of Shadows, which is written by A. Witch, which tells you what happens in the coven, what happens in the covens of witches, how to consecrate a circle, what you do with the Athnane, and these sort of things, how to do your 5-pointed star and all this.
Yeah, pentagraph.
And then let's keep moving on without boring everybody to death. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill was
Yeah.
also an excellent book, where all other self-help books stemmed this Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
There was at the time in the 20s, 1923, I think it was written that by Napoleon Hill. There was a swathe of other books.
Yeah.
Ralph Emerson, he had a series of texts that he published. One in particular that I remember was called Character, and what you need to do to make your character different, but also respectable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which was, that's always worth. That's a series of prayers to God by the ancient Egyptians. When they buried somebody, they had these spells and mystical verses, and this Egyptian Book of the Dead covers that. I don't know. It's quite varied. What I do read. It's only something that catches my interest, and I'm more of a social creature. And so I learn more from our surroundings than I do with my nose in a book. I suppose I could be more intellectual if I stuck my nose in a book more. Like I said, humor is my weakness, and you can only find humor looking around you, observing what the stupid things that other people do. So I'm more of a person rather than a bookworm, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, I am.
We're still both here.
Yeah, I mean, I've it's interesting. You talk about humour and laughing on a train. I used to travel, to work every day, an hour and 10 minutes or so, and I started to read a few Tom Sharpe books. Famous TV series years ago called Blot on the Landscape. So he would write satirical political material based around characters, and he did one, I think, called The Great Paper Chase or something, where there was a literacy agent and a fake author and all sorts of things around this guy. Yeah, and he was an expose on his very industry. They were funny because the situations were plausible, just a step beyond reality, and you couldn't help but laugh because it's just the way he managed to build the scene, and it would build up and build up. You could see probably what was coming, and then he was very good at putting a twist in it as well. Suddenly, I mean, I used to read lots of different books and things because it sounds odd, because I do teach a lot of younger people now. I sort of read, or I am more aware of literature that is being written for younger people. Sadly, I mean, possibly younger people aren't reading as much physical books now as they were in the past. I do honestly think that books enable imagination. I mean, you're saying you learn a lot from the world around you. I was probably more inclined to actually sit and read a book somewhere. It's not, didn't mean I couldn't socialize. I could.
I'm not saying you learn a lot. You learn a lot from what happens on around you. I'm saying that as my tesão in Portuguese. I don't know what it is in English because I suppose I've never had it. Anyway, but it's humor. Looking around you is where you find the humor.
Well, that's inspiration.
Not necessarily just by reading a book.
No. I mean that's it. I mean, the guy who writes the book has to get inspiration from somewhere. Nothing is stranger than real life, as we're finding out more and more. Of course. Right. Yeah. I mean, going back to what was actually probably the cornerstone of, I'm not going to say modern literature because that's not quite right, but what encouraged, if you like, modern books was actually the printing of the Bible. You might want to argue on this point, but from my understanding, now all the Bible in effect is, I'm probably going to get crucified for this, excuse the pun, but yeah, it's just a collection of ideas, poems, thoughts, feelings, depending on your viewpoint, inspired by some divine spiritual being through people or people's individual thinking. But the Bible is a collection of stories and ideas. Yeah.
You'd be surprised, Mark. There are more books, or more scripts and more stories not put in the Bible.
I know, yeah.
Than there are in the Bible.
Yeah,
because they don't fit the narrative, if you like. Yeah.
Yes, I know. The early Christians, they went and thought, well, we want that in there, we want that in, and they destroyed.
No. Yeah. But I mean, the ancient texts from Egypt and from that area, they not all of them were put in the Bible, of course.
Yeah, I mean,
way too big. But they were all stored in their libraries. The most famous one, the Library of Alexandria.
Yeah.
Before it was burnt down.
Yeah, I mean,
more scripts are not in the Bible than there are in the Bible.
Well, of course, that's inevitable. I mean, yeah, it depends what you use the Bible for. It's an interesting academic study subject. I mean, yes, it is a religious cornerstone for many. Yeah, I mean, we were taught Bible, probably not taught intensely Bible. How can I put it? We read Acts as a class. I remember that. I mean, like I say, we read a lot of books at school, so here's a class thing as well. And obviously, in religion, we read Acts. In English lesson, we read other things. But something from your part of the world I've thought about in a minute. But yeah, so the Bible again, we read as a class. We read Acts. We read, I think, Luke as well, from the birth of Jesus or the birth of Christ, depending on your viewpoint, which were good stories in themselves. And then as I sort of said, we read it as a class. Other books we read as a class at school were A Kestrel for a Knave, which I think comes from Yorkshire, your part of the world. I don't know if you know it. Remember the film?
Kes.
Yeah.
How about Kes?
Yeah, that's it.
I read that.
Yeah.
When I was at school, in the senior school, we were made to read, of course, read Twelfth Night of William Shakespeare, the play.
Yeah.
And also Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge. That's for our English lit.
Yes. You know? Yeah. Yeah, we had a bit more general English. We were made aware of Shakespeare and others. We didn't actually read them as a class. English literature wasn't separated when I was because I left school when I was 16, and I think it had gone to 18. Yeah, my school only had us up to 16. We only had 600 boys in my school as well. And it was but like I say, my school encouraged reading. They encouraged reading both, jointly and as an individual. We recorded what we read.
As schools should do.
Yes.
The school is only doing what it's supposed to do. Just for the record, I was also an Enid Blyton fan. Not so much Noddy, more the famous five.
Yeah.
Five run away together, five go to Smuggler's Top, and five go to a certain island. I can't remember what the island was, but I digress.
Yeah. No. It's interesting. I mean, it's memories of when we did another podcast about music the other week. Yeah, it's kind of literature as well. I mean, yes, I was thinking this, and it's trying to. I mean, there is a move to try and encourage youngsters to read, and I've realised with my young offspring, the teenagers now. Although, I mean, she likes reading manga. Yeah. Manga. M-A-N-G-A. Yeah, the Japanese, if you like, graphic novels. Yeah,
Okay.
but it's still reading. It's still in imagination. They are quite violent in places. She watches anime on the telly as well, on the internet or whatever. Yeah, so even she's read from quite an early age, and she had a few things from teens. Yeah, I mean, she's always read as well. She's now followed a profession, a side profession here of teaching English as well, because she's fluent in Portuguese and English. So she reads things in Portuguese as well, although she probably reads more in English because that's her language she loves. Yeah. All her music is in English normally. She's not really interested in the Brazilian. But yeah, the
Book of the Dead.
Yeah.
I translated the Book of the Dead into Portuguese.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's stuck on the hard drive of an old computer, so it's going to have to stay there until I can get around to transferring that onto this computer, this new computer that I have now, so I can, tweak it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's never going to be word perfect, but it's a work in progress.
Well,
it's almost done.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's it. Sort of said interpretation is sometimes not perfect. Just like I said, I've read some things that because I had experience of Brazil, when I've read some things that have been translated into English, have missed the point totally. But that's inevitable. And then, likewise, I've read things that were originally English things. I think books I've read. I mean, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I had all the books in the UK. I love the books. I think maybe the original radio play and possibly the original TV series did it justice. I'm afraid the film from a few years ago didn't, in my opinion. Absolutely good literature, very, very funny. I've tried reading it in Portuguese, and yet some of the humour is very, very lost. I regret leaving my copy in the UK because I didn't think anyone in Brazil would be interested. And I've met lots of younger geeks here in Brazil, probably my circles I mix in sometimes, who know it, who were perfect on it in English. So, again, that's an interest that's coming through. Anyway.
I'd like to make a correction just before we sign off.
Yeah.
I think I said that the author of The Art of Course Acting and The Art of Course Sailing was Michael Cohen. No, it's Michael Green. Michael Green, sir. That's why I was looking at the screen just now, because I was just checking. I thought it's not Cohen at all. It's Green. It's got to be Green. So it's Michael Green.
Yeah. Okay.
So he can't complain when the throngs of people watch this video until the end. That I gave him his dues.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in your opinion, Steve, is reading still relevant? Is it still important, or do you think it's?
I think it should be in some of the professions. It has to be, So in medicine, in the legal industry, it has to be. It has to be. It's very important in the legal industry because there's some people that can find 5 meanings from the same word. And that determine if a person is going to be found innocent or guilty. So, in the legal industry, it's really important. In terms of the day-to-day, I think, unfortunately, things like this, what we're doing, I used to have, when I was an adolescent, before the internet age, I used to have pen pals around the country, around the world.
Yeah.
Pen pals. And I just used to write. When I received the letter, I wrote a letter. When I wrote a letter, I received the letter. And but unfortunately, now that communication is as it is, the thing about pen pals now, I think have turned to Tinder. They've morphed into Tinder or something like that.
I don't know. I mean, we've got Instagram where the youngsters are writing to different people around the world. My daughter.
No, of course they are. But like I said, it's the Instagram is the more and more people are putting videos on, and they aren't sitting down and
Yeah.
thinking about what they. It's just like a reaction. I had
Mm.
today for lunch. I had chips, for example.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
you wouldn't write a letter to somebody saying, you know, today for lunch I had chips and put it in an envelope and sent it off to them. You know,
yeah.
you'd
I mean,
sit down and you think a long time about what you're actually going to write about,
yeah.
and
I mean,
you know, so when they receive the letter, it's going to be an interesting letter. You know?
yeah. I mean, listen to what you're saying. I mean, what I think is interesting, if you look on LinkedIn, okay, I use LinkedIn more than anything else, mainly for business. But yeah, I've learned a lot for different other people's opinions on quite important subjects. People are tending to put longer written, if you like, script on LinkedIn now. I mean, it doesn't work on Facebook because nobody reads Facebook. LinkedIn is the place, and they're trying to encourage more and more people to write articles on LinkedIn as well.
The problem to that, I can understand from LinkedIn's point of view that they're wanting more articles because it gives them more content for the site, you know, and it gives them more content. More content they have, the more visitors they're going to attract through the search engines and all that.
Yeah.
The problem isn't writing a long article. The problem is the concentration span of the reader.
Yeah.
And the world is such that the concentration span is very limited. It's limited to watch video.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about that? It's limited to watch a video.
Yeah. I mean,
and it's even less so. It's less so that people want objectivity. They want to know, instead of dancing around a subject, they want to know what is what directly, so that, you know, they can draw their own conclusions to the facts. That's how I see it.
Yeah, true. I mean, for me, you say about creativity or writing about something, you know, rather than just state facts. I'm an engineer. If I'm in work, I want facts, this, and this. If I'm away from work, I do like a bit of creativity. Which I used to read a lot more than I do now. Before I had a smartphone. My smartphone went wrong a while ago. Actually, it's great because I went back to reading books again to fill in the time, and then you realise how, this little thing I'm talking to you on now, fun enough, I use my mobile phone as a webcam. It might as well be a drug. It probably might as well be a drug because they are addictive.
Well, I think what you just said there, it says a lot, because you said that when you didn't have your phone, you put your nose in a book just to fill the time.
Yeah.
Just to fill the time. And so it isn't something that is in the forefront of your life at the moment. It's just a time filler. You know, and so I think that, you know, if you're into producing content, you need to read a lot more, of course. Dedicate yourself more to open up the spectrum of your knowledge, so that you can use this information to create the thing that you're wanting to create. Let's put it like that.